Sen.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Maruma. I think first it was worth missing our lunch, having listened to the way our clerk and deputy clerk have unpackaged the standing orders for us, and I think they deserve a clap from you. Can we appreciate them, please? Thank you. I think listening to what the clerk and deputy clerk have unpackaged for us, the work of senator should look like something very easy. You bring a bill to the floor, you process it, and it will be enacted, assented, and it will become law. But as we learn, my experience in the last 5 years has been that in a bicameral parliament, like what we have in Kenya, and like it happens in many other jurisdictions, there will always be tough wars between the two houses. That is the Senate and the National Assembly. I'm happy to see our deputy speaker, Kaduri Murungi, who is fresh from the National Assembly. Maybe will tell us why there has been this sibling rivalry between the Senate and the National Assembly. I'm happy to see Senator Ososi, who's also in the last parliament. He should really unpackage for us what causes this friction between the Senate and the National Assembly. But my experience has been that there is total lack of goodwill from the National Assembly when it comes to legislations that emanate from the Senate. That has been my experience. And number two, the National Assembly does not seem to appreciate the position that the Speaker of the Senate occupies in the legislative process as anchored by the provisions of Article 110 of the Constitution. If you read Article 110, you really don't see that, you don't see the ambiguity in the Constitution. Because Article 110(3) says, before either house considers a bill, the speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate shall jointly, that is the word, resolve a question as to whether a bill is one that concerns counties and whether it's a special or ordinary bill. But senators who served in the last Senate will tell you that oftentimes the National Assembly would proceed as if Article 110(3) does not exist in our Constitution. In fact, speaking of standing orders, to circumvent the provisions of Article 110(3), the National Assembly introduced a new standing orders. Kaduri Murungi will tell you. At standing order number 121. And they introduced a new criteria saying Article 110(3) will only come into play if a question is raised on the floor of the National Assembly. Meaning, if that issue does not arise, then they will proceed as if the Senate and our Speaker does not really exist. That has been the biggest challenge from the National Assembly. And I think if you Google what happens in other jurisdictions, this is not just unusual in Kenya. Even in the US, there have been many fights between the House of Representatives and the Senate. It is even worse in Australia, where Section 57 of the Australian Constitution has a very drastic penalty for disagreements between the two houses. In fact, in Australia, the two houses have been dissolved a record 7 times for failure to agree on legislations. Because their constitution states if the two houses don't agree, then the only consequence is for the two houses to be dissolved at the same time, and they go back to the people for fresh mandate. So this matter has been subject of several litigations. We have gone all the way to the Supreme Court. In advisory number 2 of 2013, the Supreme Court was firm that before any bill proceeds for consideration by either houses, there must be concurrence. But the National Assembly disregards all these court orders, advisories from the Supreme Court, as if they have never been rendered. So that's the first challenge you will face as senators. Number two is that even on instances where there is a concurrence between the two speakers, again, the National Assembly is never in a hurry to process bills that originate from the Senate. In that you will find many of the bills that originated from the Senate are gathering dust in the National Assembly because there is a deliberate effort in ensuring that those bills are never processed. The second challenge, which I hope I never supported the candidate, President William Ruto, but now we have to accept the reality that he's our president. The second challenge, which I hope our president can surmount and give differently, has been really the contempt, for lack of a better word, contempt from the executive. In the last parliament, the president would assent to bills that clearly concern counties and where he is aware that the Senate was not involved without any recourse to the Senate. In some very embarrassing instances, the Speaker of the Senate would be summoned to State House, and we will see pictures, you know, him in attendance when bills are being assented to, bills that concern counties, but where there was no input from the Senate. If you read the case that we filed in court, the one Senator is mentioning, 284 of 2019, we were challenging a record 28 pieces of legislation that were processed by the National Assembly and forwarded to the President for assent without the involvement of the Senate. And to give you an example, some of the acts were touching on the work of the Parliamentary Service Commission. And as you know, Parliamentary Service Commission serves both houses, National Assembly and the Senate. And it was even watering down the mandate of the Secretary of the Commission, who is our clerk here, who occupies that office by dint of the provisions of Article 127 of the Constitution. Some of the legislations involved, acts touching on health, which we all know is a devolved function. Some of the legislations concerned KEMSA, several finance and appropriation bills. The NGCDF Amendment Bill of 2015, and the High Court nullified a number of those legislations and directed that they be republished and that concurrence be sought. But again, in a very unfortunate outcome, the Court of Appeal overturned the High Court decision and set aside orders that had been issued by the High Court. We proceeded to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court gave us a stay that lasted a record, I think, was it 2 days? After 2 days, that stay, how many days was it? 1 day. 1 day. Because again, threats were issued that if you don't remove the stay, the government will close down. So our stay order again was removed by the Supreme Court, and the status quo that were there before we went to court reverted. So as we speak today, that matter is pending before the Supreme Court. So I'm making an appeal to the lawyers in the room to join me and others in really trying to see whether we can get good jurisprudence. But on a positive note, if you read petition number 1 of 2018, a judgment that was, I think, rendered by the Supreme Court in August, it restates the fact that if you don't process any bill with the involvement of the Senate or the concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate in line with the provisions of Article 110, that particular legislation will be declared unconstitutional. And I think that's one of the grounds that was cited by the court for nullifying the NGCDF Act of 2013. So there are those problems and challenges, some successes and some failures from our courts of law. The third one, as I gear towards finishing, is this issue of party positions and party caucus. I heard yesterday, I think one of our nominated senators saying that you must always agree with a party position. But you know, you must really understand the unique position that the Senate occupies. The clerk made reference to impeachments that are conducted by the Senate in line with Article 181. When I read Article 181, we sit as judges, because when you are passing a verdict on a governor, you are sitting as a judge of the High Court. So there is that challenge. Do you go by party position, or Veronica Maina, you want to sit as a lawyer, evaluate the evidence that has been brought before you, and then you pass your verdict? Where do you draw the line between a party position and sitting as a judge? Because when you are a senator passing a verdict on the impeachment of a governor, you are sitting as a judge. You are not sitting as a member of ODM or a member of UDA. Because the Constitution gives a mandate to the county assemblies to do the investigation, gather the evidence, and then come before the Senate to preside as judges. Just the way the senators in the US sit to impeach a president. And if you go down history, you will see that when President Bill Clinton was being impeached, there are 5 Democrats who voted to impeach, and a record 38 Republicans who voted against the impeachment. And when they were interviewed, they said, we are here to act in the best interest of the country, guided by our conscience and the Constitution of the United States of America. So that is maybe something we'll hear from the clerk. How do you navigate between a party position and sitting as a judicial officer when you are impeaching a governor? My take would be that moving away from issues of impeachment, when it comes to legislations, it will be good if we can have institutionalized caucuses for our various political parties. We went through some very contentious legislations towards the tail end of the last parliament. One of them was BBI. My side of coalition, never held any party caucus to take a position. I don't know whether the other side did. But when the issue comes to the floor, you will find the whip telling you, you must vote yes. But the question arises, when did we sit, caucus, and agree on a party position? The same thing with the political parties amendment bill. There was no single caucus of maybe elected senators of one side sitting, deliberating, and agreeing that we'll push this bill with the following amendments or without any amendments. Oftentimes there is never caucus. I hope this Senate can find mechanisms of having caucuses like what we saw when we went to the US, where the Democrats and the Republicans even hold lunch sessions and they caucus. They look at the legislative agenda for that particular month, and then they take positions. Are we supporting? What amendments are we going to push on the floor? And they allow the leaders on both sides to negotiate. Say, this is the proposal we are bringing forth. The other side, do you agree? Do we push this in a bipartisan way? I think that's something we really need to think about. As I finish, there is this animal we call PSC. Because all this, you allow you process your bills and everything. You need an office that is well resourced with staff that can assist you in seeing what petitions you are forwarding to the floor. They assist you on bills, etc. But I always disagree with the position taken by Parliamentary Service Commission that you treat a member of a National Assembly representing one constituency and then a senator like Boni Galwale who I think comes from account with, is it 11 constituencies? 12. 12. Now you assign the same amount of money to Senator Galwale to run his office in the constituency, the same way you are giving a member of parliament for maybe Ikolomani, for example. You know, from Meru, I don't know whether there are, how many Kaduri? How many? 9 constituencies. If you go to Nairobi, it's 17, Kiambu 12. But PSC takes the position that the same money you give a member of National Assembly is the same money you give to a senator. That is designed to ensure that we are not effective, that we are not able to defend devolution effectively. In the US, when they allocate offices, because they know that senators will receive delegations and visitors with issues from a larger area, they give them bigger offices, 5,000 square feet. Then the House of Representatives will get 1,500 to 2,500 office space, so that you're able to have enough staff that can attend. If we have 11 people coming from Kakamega, Ikolomani, Navagolo, and the likes, you can assign your staff to attend to each of these separately. So this idea of PSC really assigning us the same office space, same members of staff, same mileage. When you move to Kakamega, you will not just go and finish at Ikolomani. You will move around Kakamega constituency. I think it's one of the challenges that makes the work of senator not to be effective, even when it comes to court matters. You can imagine a situation where you go to court in some of the litigations I've mentioned. The Parliamentary Service Commission appoints external lawyers for the National Assembly, but declines to appoint lawyers for Senate, so that we are forced to act pro bono. That is a scheme that is meant to ensure that the Senate is not very effective, and I hope we can have unity of purpose on this issue of PSC. We push our coalition, the minority side, because Article 127 says minority side, the side not forming government will pick 3 MPs, one of whom must come from either of the houses. Since in the first bicameral parliament, the 2 came from National Assembly. The second bicameral parliament, again, they came from the National Assembly. This time we should insist that the 2 representatives should come from Senate, and the National Assembly gives us 1 representative, so that we can have 4 senators from the Senate in PSC and 2 members of National Assembly, so that we have 4. Maybe this time around, the clerk, the vice chair of the commission, should come from the Senate, so that we can push forward the agenda that should really strengthen Senate. So because of time, I think I will stop there. If there was time, I could have discussed more. But in brief, those are some of the challenges that you will encounter as a senator. And I hope when the right time comes, you will find Senior Counsel Mogeni a worthy representative of the Senate in the Parliamentary Service Commission. Thank you.
Let's have a better round of applause for Senior Counsel. Now convert yourself to